don't admit them on time. They just think there's something and they don't.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Abiola Abiodun, and I really appreciate it. We've been here for about 8 minutes, and there are technical issues, so some of us are logging on and logging off, but we're all here. Thank you so much. Today, we would be looking at the book, Who Moved My Cheese? Before we start, I'm going to set up a poll to know how many people have actually read the book. So before we start, I would like to just give some house rules. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. If you have any comments, please put them in the chat box. Kindly mute yourself when you come in so that we maximize time and we're not distracting the process. That's basically it. I'm going to launch a poll now. I will just mention the name of our speaker. Is a lot of us know him. His name is Mr. Akisonya, and he's a senior lawyer, and he's here with us today. Hello, sir. Thank you so much for being here. And we will be reviewing the book, Who Moved My Cheese by Dr. Spencer. I'm going to launch a poll now where about 22 people, and I want to find out how many of us have actually read the book. So just bear with me for a moment while I launch the poll. I'm not going to bother to read Mr. Akisonya's very, very extensive profile. He would do that. Once you hear him, you will understand why I'm not reading the poll. So I have launched, reading the bio. I have launched the poll. Can you see it? Can you please indicate or respond if you can see it and if you can hear me? Can you see the poll? Mr. Akisonya, please, can you?
Yes. If you have seen the poll, there are two questions that we need to answer. Have you read the book? Yes or no? And if you have, which character do you identify with? Which character do you identify with? And the way the poll is going, it is looking 50-50 at the moment. Which character do you identify with? I'd like to see that. I'd like to see who identifies. I'm particularly keen to see who identifies with him. Some say they identify with none. That might be a tough one, but okay. All right. Do we give a few more minutes for the poll?
I think I'll just leave the poll on for say about 3 minutes, because I'm sure some people are, trying to figure it out. Because we have 3 responses and we are 22 people.
We're 23 now.
23 now.
Okay. All right. So I think we should just we should jump into it so that those of us who are here will get a sense of it.
Okay, so I'm going to read the poem by A.J. Cronin. Can everyone hear me? Can you
very
just
clearly. Just
okay,
go ahead.
great.
I'm sure they can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So it says, life is no straight and easy corridor, which we travel free and unhampered, but a maze of passages through which we must seek our way, lost and confused, now and again, checked in a blind alley. But always, if we have faith, a door will open for us, not perhaps one that we ourselves would ever have thought, but one that will ultimately prove good for us. This is a poem by A.J. Cronin. With that, I will be handing over to the very able Mr. Akisonya.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you very much. I was very excited when she mentioned that she would like me to do a book review with the book club. And when she asked me which book, I thought to myself, especially because of all that, uh, especially in the field of mediation, but I don't want to even come to mediation right now. I want us to bring it in at the end because I find that the book impacts every area of one's life, every area of one's life. I've read many books that are 100 pages, 200 pages. There are books that have taken me days to read, some have taken weeks to read. This is a book which, if you read as fast as I read, you could finish in about an hour and a half. And I mean that. And when I say an hour and a half, you're not rushing, you're not skimping, you're not skipping over pages, you're not missing anything out, you're virtually reading word for word. If you're a slow reader, maybe 3 hours. But I think most of us can do it in about 2 hours. But what has always amazed me about it was that the first time I read the book, which was about 20 years ago, in the year in which I read it, I read the book about 4 times. And why did I do so? You'll find the book itself is quite it's quite instructive. The book is actually put in 3 parts. There's the first part of a group of people who come together from maybe old colleagues and things like that, and they from work, and they all just meet and they're discussing where things are. Then there's the second part of it, which is the main book itself, that then tells the story of Sneeve, Scurry, Hem, and Haw, or Haw and Hem. And then the last part, which is where, in fact, we would almost be starting from, is what happened. How do they apply that to all of their lives? And one thing that they find is that this book, the lessons in it, applies to all of us in virtually every area of our lives. It affects us in our workplace. It affects us in family relationships. It affects us in our profession. And one of the major things that I find is that the lesson is so real. There's some books that are just like what I'd call permanent classics that just don't seem to ever go old. I believe 40 years from today, Who Moved My Cheese will always be relevant. There'll always be something to learn in it. And I believe that that opening poem or passage by A.J. Cronin that tells us that life is no straight and easy corridor is that Who Moved My Cheese is about life generally as we move around. And when he uses the idea that they are looking for cheese in a maze, he's actually helping us to understand if you've ever been in a real maze, and I believe that let me interrupt and specially welcome and greet my teacher, Mr. Dennis Okoro. I feel very honored and privileged, sir. Now I'm nervous. I can't speak again, but thank you for being here with us, sir. Thank you very much. So if ever you thought that if you've ever been in a real maze, and very early on in my younger days, when I traveled abroad and I went to a real maze, it's interesting that life is very much like that. We don't know what tomorrow is going to come. You are going, you don't even know, you don't see in front of you. So the use of the maze in the story is so is so is so real, is so apt to what we're doing and to what the story is about. And these 4 people are so like all of us. I could identify with them. I'll tell you right from the word go. I identify them as oh, I like to be very cerebral. I reason, I think, I overthink, I overanalyze, I over, you know, look at all things, and I'm so intellectual that sometimes the simple things of life may pass one by. And what Who Moved My Cheese does is this group of friends. Two are actually mice now, which indicate that they're animals who move mainly by instinct, going by what pleases them, what attracts them. And the other two are little people. They're like human beings. But the major reason that that makes them little people is that you'll find that, like many of us, we have intellect. We think, we analyze, we reason everything out. We have to work it out, and somehow we don't get to be daring, as daring as we could be. So the four of them, in the beginning of the story, after the friends have come together, and they're now telling the story. They're now telling the story in the book. You know, the and they're they're not the story. There's a place they go to every day. They follow the same routine. They get there. There's cheese for them to eat. They go there every day, and after a while, because they're always finding the cheese in the same place every day, they are settling down to the cheese. They're enjoying the cheese. They are getting on with it. And in fact, after a while, all the preparations they used to take before, like their shoes they used to wear, they stopped bothering. They were not. They became complacent. Oh, the cheese will always be there. No exercise. They didn't bother. They didn't even think about it. It just came natural to them. Now, the benefit of hindsight, of having read the book, is that actually there came a time when the cheese was actually getting spoiled. So it was losing taste. Secondly, the quantity was reducing. But such was their complacency that they could not notice those things. And they just continued to eat and nibble. And the thing was disappearing, and they never noticed it. It was smelling putrid, it was getting bad, they never noticed it. And then one day, they got there, and there was no more cheese. And that's where the topic of the book came in. Who moved my cheese? Who took away my cheese? Who removed what I'm used to? Where is my cheese? Who's taking it? And even beyond what the book itself shows, the first thing that struck me is that number one, they assume somebody must have moved the cheese. First thing that we all do wrong in life. We always assume that somebody must be responsible for our problem. Somebody or something must be responsible for the problem. Number two, the cheese is no longer there. Now, the little mice were a little smarter. And if the cheese is not where they are, let's go and look around. Let's see, perhaps it's moved somewhere. Can we see where it has moved to? Or can we see if there's some other cheese anywhere else that we may get? That's fine. But you see, the two little people, one of them, like I said, with whom I identified, that it all, sat down and they began to make plans. They began to discuss intellectually, who could have taken it? How could this have happened? Who was responsible for this? And they remained in that place until actually they began to be hungry, they began to be weak, they began to lose their strength. But meanwhile, Sniff and Scurry had gone ahead, going through the maze, going back and forth, and knowing that, well, if this cheese is not here, there has to be cheese somewhere. And then came, after a little bit of suffering, which is good because sometimes suffering helps us to move. The the whore decided, look, let me go out there. I needed to go. And then they went out there, and eventually he found cheese. And one of the things about the cheese, finding cheese at the end of the story, is this, that, ah, well, wait a minute. The way they arrived at the cheese was not the usual way, was not the same kind of path they have followed in always having reached the cheese in the beginning. So, secondly, when Hall found the cheese, not only did he find the new cheese, he actually found new varieties of cheese, different and in addition to even the ones he had enjoyed before. So it was a better place for him. However, the problem he had now was to try to convince him that, look, Hem, I have found I have found a new place where there is cheese. Come with me. Hem is not ready to take the risk. No, he's comfortable where he is, and he's not going to try that. He's just not going to try that. So he's not interested. And he stays there, possibly maybe he died of hunger eventually, but the system, he lost it. So the question then at the end was the parties now came back together and they now asked themselves, what do you think of this story? How does it apply to us? And this is where, for those of us who are in mediation, and I'll come to that in a second, because like I said, Who Moved My Cheese is a story that all of us need to be used to, need to learn about. We have children growing up, sometimes in many families. We don't realize it when our children grow from being babies to being little boys and girls, to being little men and women, to being little teenagers. And sometimes we want to treat them exactly the way they were at the beginning. We don't smell the cheese. We don't smell that things are changed. Things where we were, how we were at the beginning, will never be the way we are today. In relationships, husband and wife and husband, is got to understand that your wife or your husband can never be on in even year 5 how they were in year 1. It doesn't mean they've become bad. It doesn't mean they've become worse. It doesn't mean that they love less or you love them more or they're no longer attractive. It's just that sometimes you are not looking at, you're not smelling the cheese. Things have moved on. In many companies, there have been stories of companies that have died because they just refused to move when their cheese had moved on. They just didn't realize that the cheese, first of all, the important thing is, what does the cheese signify? Is what is our normal routines. There comes a time when our normal routines will just not apply. Number two, there comes a time when we must begin to realize, as in relationships, as in companies, we need to begin to realize that things have changed, you know. And number three, we have to understand that when when we do not go for that new cheese, you know, Paul at a point in time, he realized something which many of us hope joyfully realize, which is that sometimes if you had moved earlier, you would have found the cheese earlier. He wasted time, but at least thankfully he moved. Hem refused. Hem refused. And one thing that was happening a lot with Paul was that he kept using his imagination. You see, the one thing that I learned from that is that, you see, your vision must not be governed only by what you see. Your vision must be governed also by what you think and what you dream. And sometimes what you think and what you're able to dream, when it is not consistent with the reality in front of you, becomes the indication to you that that reality is no longer relevant and it's time to put it aside. Do you understand what I'm saying? It comes to, you see, when Hall was making his move, sometimes people can go by instinct. The major difference between the little people, the mice, is that they were mice, they were animals, they were going by instinct. If you read it, and I recommend that everybody reads it, Hall was being motivated in his move, not just by a desire to find new cheese, but one of the things that spurred him on towards finding new cheese was he was constantly imagining what it would be like to find that cheese. He was constantly imagining and dreaming how much he would enjoy the cheese. He was constantly visualizing what a new cheese station would be like. And that enabled him, that spurred him on. So even though he had not even seen the cheese yet, but because he could visualize the cheese, he could move toward it. He could be motivated to keep going even when he had not found the cheese. And the thing that I took from that, even when I read it the first time round, is that if you go only by what is in front of you or only by your circumstances, you may still not be successful. If you want to rely on just your sixth sense, on just what comes to you naturally, you may eventually succeed. But you'll notice one thing, that at the end, well, let me say, for those of us who have read it, you would notice that although Sniff and Scurry also found cheese, there was a little difference between the kind of cheese they found. When Hall found his own new cheese station, when he found his own new uh, cheese station, his own cheese station was more more comprehensive. It was more abundant. It had variety. He even had, now wait for this. He even had in it cheese of varieties that he never had before. So who moved my teeth is teaching, is, or let me say, it taught me. Why I enjoyed the book is it showed me that, listen, how things are, if you think that they're going to remain like that every day forever, get ready to be disappointed and get ready to be let down. That's one. Number two, you cannot afford to take for granted. If you must be vigilant, because number two, when the cheese was diminishing, it was already smelling bad. It was later on that Hall recognized that, whoa, that's true. This cheese was already smelling bad. It was already going down. Sometimes when we are not open to change, we don't even see when change comes, when change needs to be made. We become so complacent in what we are. We take life for granted. It will always be there. But
Permit me to just interject here, sir.
yes,
I just wanted to say that that the fact that they didn't even realize that the cheese had gone stale in itself was is something, and I'm sure all of us can identify with. You're just used to something, and you're like a rat in the wheel. You just keep doing the same thing over and over again, not realizing that this is no longer the path forward. So it's kind of like you're stuck, and you're used to this, to the ambience. You're used to the everyday activity that has become a norm for you, and you just forget the fact that there's actually something different and there can be something new. I see
yes,
comments here about not being complacent. One needs to remove complacency for from our lives. Alignment is key. We must be adaptable and ready to embrace change. Yes, it is a very tough, tough reality. Yes, so I just wanted to chip that in, sir.
Thank you very much for that. This one last comment I'd like to make, because I really would want. Well, I know systems are a bit challenging, but I would really want to get some reactions. If we can't speak, write the chat. But you'll notice one thing. Number one, that Hall was motivated even when he didn't know where the cheese would be, but he had the dream. And that is one thing that many of us need to be aware of. The dream you have may not have an equivalent in reality. Please let that not be a reason not to dream. Okay? Let that never be a reason not to dream. Sometimes they say, you're a dreamer, you're a dreamer, you don't reality. Sometimes dreams are very good for motivating you. It keeps your hope alive. It was because Hall was having those dreams that spurred him on, even when many times he did not find cheese. Even when many times he was becoming weak and he was becoming slow, he was becoming weakened, but he had a dream. Lastly, I'll say this, that move my cheese is not just the things that change, the cheese itself. The cheese itself. What is our cheese in our lives? And in I said I wanted to get some response from some people. I know many of us are mediators, and I want to say this, that where have I found this useful? I find that in many conflicts, in many disputes amongst people, the reason why the dispute persists, or sometimes, let me put it more positively, if you are going to find a solution to a conflict or a dispute between two persons, you have to encourage them, and you yourself have to find, is there another way of seeing what has happened between? Is there another angle to it? Is there another, is there another, is there another perspective? Is there something, you know, I I'm a lawyer myself, so I have nothing against lawyers, but I always say that one of the things that makes litigation tedious is because it is dealing with the past. What happened? Who did not do what they should do? It's always about the status quo. What happened? What should not have happened? Who said what? Who did this? Therefore, who should be compensated for what has happened? But life is not lived in the past. Life is a continuous journey forward. So dealing with what has happened slows us down because it is inconsistent with the reality of life. So if I'm constantly thinking of how things are, how they were, and why should they change, why should they not have changed, which is what kept him where he was. I don't agree with this. I have to get to the bottom of this. There must be a reason why cheese is no longer at that station. No, I'm going to wait there until I get to the root of the matter. Who took that cheese? That's litigation for you. With all due respect to all of us who are lawyers, that is litigation for who moved the cheese. Who should not have moved the cheese? Who moved the cheese? Who had no power to move it? Who did wrong by moving it? Who should be punished for moving it? I'm not going to leave this place until I see justice done. But meanwhile, what has happened? You are starving. Your business is faltering. Your life is drawn to a halt. You've lost your peace. Instead of thinking, well, okay, fine, that has happened now. What is the way forward? And for those of us who are familiar with any kind of resolving of disputes, even if we don't call it mediation, even if it's just a pastor in church helping a couple, a married couple, or helping two members of a family or helping parents and children to find a solution, you find that the best solution always is, okay, what is the best way forward now? What is the best step forward now? Where do we see it? And how the book helps us is, I saw a comment here by one of my colleagues, my sister Natalia. I agree with her. You, when I first read it, I said to myself, I think I can fit into every one of the four characters. And in a way, I believe, and I do not speak for the author, but I think he actually expects that in each of us, we can find aspects of our different characters, different aspects of our individual characters that are like Sniff, Scurry. There's a bit of me sometimes that is like the whore that wants to move. But sometimes I'm like the hem. And it's like, no, you have to persuade me. You have to show me the logic of it. I'm not, I don't agree with this. But you'll find, read all the stories of the people that have done best in business or in whatever it is. There are people who dared to do things differently. There are people who dared to move forward in a maze without seeing the way forward. There are people who dared to say, well, if this has changed, if this has gone stale, there must be a new way of doing it. There must be some way of getting there. Uh, COVID-19 taught many of us that this Zoom thing can be quite efficient after all. I'm one of those who thought Zoom was invented in 2020. I, to my amazement, I was told that Zoom had been around years before then. There are even things like Blue Jeans and some other such programs that were available, but nobody thought to use them. Nobody thought today. I mean, not many of us thought that. Okay, look, listen, you can do things online. Recently, I was on a program, and there was a gentleman from from California who has an online dispute resolution service. And I was shocked when he said he had been doing online dispute resolution since 1990. I didn't even know about mediation in 1990. So it's amazing how sometimes we need to be imaginative. We need to understand, we need to be able to smell that to there's that ability to know when what is in front of us is no longer quite as effective. It's time to move on. People, I'm not too good with the facts, but people have told us of what happened to Nokia and BlackBerry and the rest of them because the trees moved, but they stayed. The Swiss watchmakers nearly lost their business because they would not initially adjust to digital watchmaking, but they, like Hall, recovered quickly enough to retain their relevance in the watch industry. So, ladies and gentlemen, what does Who Moved My Cheese? What does it do for me? It is a it is an ever relevant lesson and guide to me that number one, never remain on the same spot too long. Number two, even when something is succeeding, be intuitive and instinctive to know when its relevance is reducing. And you need to know when it's time to move on. If you're dealing with friends, if you're dealing with family, if you're dealing with business, you need to know when what you are doing in the way you are doing it is no longer as efficient as it should be. And finally, you should know when you have, in fact, I'm going to steal the words from my sister on the chat, in the chat room there. You should know when you have been remaining on the same spot for too long. There's some people, they do the same thing the same way every year, and then they wonder why it doesn't grow. So this is the lesson we learn. And like I said, you can find yourself in every way. And I would say this, whether you're trying to mediate a dispute, Whether you're trying to think of your business, always think of yourself in every single one of those places. There's a place for just moving by your instinct. There's a place by just moving by your, what the Americans call your guts, your gut feeling. There's a place also for having your dream, for imagining where you want to get to even before you get there, and let that motivate you till you get there. And then finally, you'll find that, look, you may need to think things differently. How do I relate to my family? How do I relate to my children? How do I relate to my husband, to my wife, to my colleagues at work? Is there a different way of doing things? Is there a different approach? Things don't remain the same. So let me just say this, that looking at myself in all of the various phases, I've also seen myself being hemmed sometimes. And I remember recently, like there was a part of my house that had carpeting. And my wife suggested to me, why don't we change the carpeting and have um, tiles? I said, no, I just don't. I like the, I was very comfortable with the carpet, you know. And then, you know, well, she didn't argue with me. She left it. And then, thank God that Abby asked me to do this book review. And after I finished reading the book, I thought to myself, Mr. Kisoya, you installed that carpet in 1997. I mean, for crying out loud, this is 2023. And this, if nothing else, is due to change. I mean, and then, the funny thing, I now walked around the room where they had the carpeting. And for the first time, I saw certain stains that I hadn't seen before. I saw things that were so obvious that, how could I have missed this? That was the hem in me. How could I have missed it? 1997 to 2017. I think if people is 20 years to 2023 is 26 years. But you see, I was not prepared to be flexible. I could not. I was Mr. Hem. And because of that, I nearly lost the opportunity to get now what are beautiful tiles. And I wondered to myself, how could I ever have lost the opportunity for that? So we must be innovative. We must be innovative. We must be open to change. We must know when to move on. We must be ready to be flexible. That yes, go with your gut feeling, like Snape and Scurry. Yes, Snape and Scurry, they were friends. They moved together. Sometimes you should know when it is okay to move in company. Know when it's okay to have others work with you, but be ready sometimes to be on your own with nobody beside you. Like eventually, Hall was on his own. He had no company. He had nobody to encourage him, and even his friend was actually discouraging him. You must know there's a point in your time when you must know. Yes, there's wisdom, there's safety. They say there's in the multitude of in the multitude of counsel there's safety. Yes, but you must also know when sometimes you have to go it alone. So let me stop there. I'd just like to, Abiola. I don't know. Are there any questions for me, or do you want to
Thank you so
comment?
much. I mean, I've read this book about 4 times, and every time I read it, there's something new. And Natalia had put in the group chat about identifying with all four of them. And my response to her was, for me, I identify with all of them depending on the dynamics of the situation. There are times when I just don't want to move. As I was speaking with Mr. Kisoya yesterday, I said, at times, for us, depending on where you're at in life, there might be no cheese. You're just used to the concept of the fact that there's cheese. And there are times where the cheese you see is actually not the cheese you should be seeing, or basically it's not what you need at that particular moment in time. So there's so many things. This book was written in 1998. And fun fact, over 40 million copies of this book has been sold, and it's been interpreted into so many languages. So this is just to say, as I was talking to Mr. Kisanya yesterday, the truth in this book, the reason why this book is still so relevant after so long is because it's based on truths that are incontrovertible. They just are, which is why, even as he said earlier, 40 years from now, this book will still be relevant. I found out during my research online that there is a video of this book. So I am going to personally look for it and watch it, and I'm sure I'm going to learn something new. I'm going to read through the comments here. If you have any questions or you have any contributions, please raise up your virtual hand so that I can call you. Yes, Mr. Okoro, I cannot, even if there was anybody else before you, I wouldn't call them. So please, sir, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Okay, you have unmuted. Yes, sir.
Well, first of all, I must commend my student, Mr. Kishaya. I wasn't surprised. I haven't seen this book nor heard about it, but now that, although I had some glitches because of Nigerian language in my system, but I reestablished myself. I will only take what is our very nose to explain how far I understood the book. And remember when Chinua Achebe wrote Things Fall Apart, and I asked some my expatriate friends, they said that book so simply written that every culture found something in it that they can identify with. Same also as this book, Who Moved the Cheese? Akisola, do you know that since independence, we have continued in the same pattern, although we call it development, and we have never looked outside that pattern. I'm taking education, for example, because it's the area I lived all my life. Our own generation, the few companies in the country came for us was as we were finishing school. So you pick and choose between immigration, customs, railway, P&T, and the likes. Gradually, we continued. You just have a degree, you have a job. You have a skill set, you can be a clerk. It has continued. And that is why they've eaten, the cheese have been eaten by 2-3 generations before the present ones. And we're still doing the same thing, giving the same certificates, knowledge that has no application, certification. Parents are paying millions in nursery school for a child, primary school, to be certified, while we are 23 years behind on the 21st century. People are dispensing with 4-year degree courses now and asking for a 2-year if you do what you call prompt engineering in artificial intelligence. Your starting salary will be something nothing less than $250,000 overseas anywhere. And you're doing, we're teaching the same thing. In our governance system, we have continued. The number of states you have, you must have the number of ministers. The number of state governments you have, great new ones, you have all chairmen. We are dispensing money. The oil was our cheese. What is happening to oil today? The oil is disappearing quietly. Artificial cars, electronic cars, AI-driven cars are coming in. What will happen to you in the next 15 years? So crying that our students have no job, they japa. Those who japa are those who have skills, who have gone beyond what they are taught and use the open source online, the MOOCs, to train themselves further. My son, you know my age. At 88, I'm as good at computer like any young man, because I found that you cannot remain static and be relevant. If Nigeria does not change, transform its education, overhaul it totally, but you need somebody with vision. If you look at the countries like the Singapore, South Korea, Finland, all of them, it is the vision you talked about of the leadership that drives these things, because they expect their country to do this. But what have we done? We continue with entitlement mentality. The little resources you have, you want to occupy a position just to take a part of it, and you're not thinking of building up varieties of cheese so that at every point, each generation will find their nick on it. So that is the way I saw the totality of the book. Nigeria has to wake up, because we're going to disappear like the cheese.
Like the cheese.
By the time we start looking for it, we don't have the skill to enable us to look for the cheese. Thank you.
That is table shaking. That is
very profound.
You know, I'm just gonna say this, Mr. Okoro, God bless you, sir. I think, and I mentioned this to Mr. Akisanya yesterday, it is impossible for us to totally understand or grasp the concept of who moved my cheese in session. I am someone who's very conscious of time. We have been here since, it's 7 o'clock Lagos time. It's 1 p.m. my time. It's 1:55. And I see 3 hands up. The first person, would you like to make a comment to that, or do we take all the people who their hands
let's take all the people. And can I please ask Abiodun that in the same spirit of Who Moved My Cheese, let's just leave time for a while. I think people are anxious to say things. Let's hear them.
Yes, no, we will. I'm just saying that I'm just laying the foundation so that there would be, if there's
necessary, further sessions.
For further sessions on this Who Moved My Cheese, because I also thought of the fact that there are other things that you didn't touch upon that I would like to, but I don't want to take away from what we've started now.
Fantastic.
So the first person whose hand was up was Oladipo Ola Alade. Would you please unmute, sir? Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's good evening here, good afternoon over there, and good morning.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for this wonderful program. I want to thank Brother Yemi Akisanya, is my big brother, for remembering to call me into this, because this is so relevant in the age we're in. Interestingly, in this book, Who Moved My Cheese, right? I'd been hearing about it for a while. You know, it's one of those books that have come, to stay, in the back of our minds. Books like Straight and Crooked Thinking, those books are just classics. Interestingly, the first person who got this book in my family was my last child, my daughter. Her brother gifted it to her at the age of 11. And one thing I read at the preface of the book was that anybody and everybody at whatever age could make something positive out of it. And my daughter was so intrigued by the book that she's read it 3 times. An 11-year-old girl, now 12. So that's the power and the potency behind this book. But straight to my I have two major points, and Professor Okoro, is it, has touched on most of the first part. For mediation, I thought this was something, a book club, but with a mediation flavor, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Okay, that's the part I'm really interested in. And I think the cheese has really moved. Mediation used to be something that was looked, it wasn't even in the picture. And I want, as much as possible, if this book has to be re-reviewed and re-presented to drive the point home, it'll be well worth it. Because if you look at the legal system we have today, let's just use Nigeria as an example. I will not mince my words in telling us that the system has failed the people woefully. In those days, it used to be prestigious to be a senior advocate. These days, I'm sorry, the kind of remarks I hear is a shame. Judiciary, there's nobody who will spare the Supreme Court these days. So what are we left with? The cheese in the judiciary that was the last hope of the common man has moved. Litigation in courts where a lot of confidence was placed on all the erudition and all the, research and all the of lawyers is gone. So what am I saying to cut the long story short so that other people can contribute? It'll be well worth it. I don't know whether it is harm or share. I haven't read the book.
You should, sir. You should get it from your daughter.
Yes.
No, if my daughter has read it 3 times and is so intrigued about it, and all the big brains are here talking about it, I'm going to go get that book tonight. I've told her to get it out.
Great.
Because there's a lot. Like they say, simplicity is genius. The simplicity of this book must be the genius that it carries. So mediation, to me, is the new cheese that we really need to, to bake. I love cheesecake a lot. My wife is a prolific baker. Cheese, that is the cheese we really need to. And somebody said at
You
one
don't
of
do
the...
justice. She's not just a prolific baker. She's a superb baker of mouth-watering.
Wow.
Please, God. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I'm going to make a day tonight.
Can you just wrap up, sir? We have 2 other people, and I'm sure there are comments in the comments.
Yes,
Like to read.
I want to do that. I want to
Thank
do
you.
that. I'm mindful of that. So please, mediation came like at the last one on the queue in the judicial system, but it is now a case of the first, the last that must become the first. Alternative dispute resolution, arbitration, yes, it's good. But before you gather the resources and all that and the securities for arbitration, many people lose it. I see the mediation hub, the mediation space being the real solution provider that we must all embrace. You don't need to spend so much money, go against each other so much. You can save so much time and just realize that we don't have to come before some people who we can't trust anymore. When we can simply just trust each other and iron each other's issues out peaceably too. I know dragging people, compelling people to come to mediation is an uphill task, but it's already happening in arbitration. It's already happening in arbitration, and I want us to please seize the occasion to see how these innovations can help us. Mr. Okoro has done substantial justice to the other point out of that. I really thank you for the
Thank you, sir.
opportunity, and I look forward to the next one.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. I appreciate your contribution. Thank you so much. Natalia, your hand was the second one up. Can you please unmute? Natalia, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. It's always a delight to hear Mr. Kinsonya talk. Okay, so I just want to quickly say that I'm a combination of the four characters. In fact, and I dare say that I'm more of a hem, you know, trying to. But in recent times, I have learned to not be too serious with certain things, like taking too hard, like staying in one position for too long. Because realize that when you worry too much and overanalyze things, you would never move. You will not make any
Analysis
progress.
paralysis.
Instead, yes, exactly. And you'll be focused more on the negative than the positive because your whole mindset is just so like a friend of mine, who is like 10 years younger than me, once said to me, then I used to worry a lot. He just said to me, he said, let it play. That there are so many things you can't control. There are so many things you can't, but you just have to actually make some moves. So it's a wonderful thing we are discussing this, especially because we are entering a new year. We should really learn because some of us are not ready to move from our comfort zone. If we don't move, and that's what happened to, Hem and Pam or so. There was the other person's name.
Hem and Hall.
Yes, thank you, sir. So they were not ready to make that change. Although one of them eventually decided, okay, I think it's time to just accept this change and move on. If you don't accept change, if you're not flexible, you will never make any progress and you keep moving in circles. So as we enter the new year, we should be open to criticisms. Some are positive, some are negative. Just, take what works best for you. And if you also learn to take corrections, you make progress. And then a lot of us need to change our circles. Believe me, when we say change your circle, there are some people who may not want you to move away from them, not because they don't want to, you don't want to progress, but we need to recognize that there are people in our lives that their chapter has ended with us, and so we have to move away. If we don't, we won't make any progress. We want to hold on to, we've been together for years. It doesn't always work. If the person is not making any meaningful impact in your life, move. And if you're also not making meaningful impact in the lives of people, they will also move. So sometimes don't be surprised when people just cut off from you. We need to recognize that the new year is a new opportunity for us to, right now, let us take stock of how this year has gone, and then know where we're going to make changes. And then by this time next year, we will see how much progress we've made. I speak from experience. I would say that this happened to me. The COVID era was a blessing to me, not because I made millions, but it was a period for me to change a lot of things, cut off from a lot of people, and deal with moving from my comfort zone. And today I look back and I would say I've made considerable progress, and I'm looking forward to 2024. Thank you for the opportunity. This book review has helped a great deal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natalia. Your contribution is much appreciated. You wanted to say something?
Incidentally, you're right. There came a time when Hem and Hall, they were together, but there came a time when Hall realized that continued loyalty to Hem was hindering his own progress. And there was a time he needed to move away forward from Hall. So thank you very much for that. That is very insightful and spot on.
So I know Melvin's hand was up, but before we take him, I just want to read something from the book. So one thing Hall did, at every time he had a thought process and something hit him, he left little notes, right? So on page 54 of the book, he says, movement in a new direction helps you find cheese. So it's important to move because even time is moving. Time isn't static. There's always motion, there's always movement. Everything is moving. So the longer you stay in one position, the more irrelevant, the more irrelevant you become. And then there's one thing I'd like us to hold in our left hand, as my people say. What would you do if you weren't afraid? That's one thing that's important you think about. What is it? What is that thing you would do when it's time for you to, when you have smelled the cheese and you have realized either it's gone stale or it's moved, whether it was moved by you or somebody else moved it, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Now, is Melvin there? I see your hand is still up. Can you please unmute?
Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity. Good evening, everyone. Okay, thank you. Okay, I just want to especially appreciate Mr. Kisoya for this wonderful review. A copy of this book was given to me by Mr. Kisoya over 10 years ago. I think about 30 of us, he brought this book at Protea Hotel in Lekki. Sometime we had a meeting of Young Diners Club, and he shared this book to about 30 of us then, over 10 years ago. And I went through this book, and I had the opportunity of hearing Mr. Kisoya review this book over 10 years ago, and he mentioned certain things. And I must say that the book really shaped my life. A lot of things and a lot of my thought process, a lot of the decisions, I go back to some of the principles let down in this book. And in fact, it has been a fantastic book. So I must say that prior to receiving this invite, I spoke with someone about 3 days ago, and I referred this person to read this particular book. Coincidentally, this person is on this call. I had to send in the invite to join and to get this. And it's been very fantastic. Change is constant, and we must always be sensitive to know when to move. That applies to us in every sphere of our lives. Whether it's personal lives, in our profession, and it's our social life. And that has been so fundamental to me. I want to use this opportunity to tell Mr. Kisoya, thank you once again, and God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to read through the comments in the chat box, just in case there are any questions. So just bear with me while I navigate to the comments.
Okay, let me fill the gap while you're finding that. Once you're doing, just
I think
hold.
Mr. Okoro wants to come. He's mute. Can you please unmute, sir? Thank you, sir.
Yes. Hear me?
Yes, sir.
Where can one get this book?
I will deliver one to you, sir.
Okay.
That is an order. So how many do you want, sir?
If I can have 10, my grandchildren will start reading it so that their lives will be changed. If I can get them and let me have cost, the cost.
Take it as done, sir. You know, we say when the call is sounded, almost answer here.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's done, sir. All right.
All right.
Great. So I just almost found the book. I am so glad you are here, and I'm glad you found the book. Oyedima says yes to changing of circles. I did that 3 years ago from a particular circle, and I got good results. Great stuff. Congratulations on moving. Gently encouraging speakers to be a little more brief. Okay. It's 8 years wise. You are an inspiration, Mr. Okoro. When you said when you mentioned something about AI, I don't know if anybody noticed, I actually did a double take because I was having this conversation with my mom, and she's like, no, please, all those things are for the youth. You people, every time she's like, you know me, I'm old school. I'm like, Mom, you're not that old. So I'm going to tell her, and I'm actually going to make her watch this and say, Mommy, Mr. Okoro is 88. So you really have no reason to be sending me on errands like, oh, take me to my Facebook page. and all those kind of things. Thank you so much for being here, sir. So I love the analysis of our oil being our cheese. Though quietly running out, we still gather around it, not knowing that it's full of fungi. Somebody's tapping into Mr. Okoro's longevity. Longevity. Yes, oil was our cheese. Somebody is shocked that Mr. Okoro was or is 88. I wish you many more years in good health. The comparison of the analogy of our Nigerian oil, our oil being our cheese, is something I think we're going to discuss. And Mr. Okoro, please, I will be collecting your number from Mr. Kisanya, and I will be having a conversation with you. It's 2:14. Does anybody have any comments they would like to make? Somebody says, I need to know too, how can we get it? Okay, so I think if you Google the book, and there's actually a website.
You can get it on Amazon, you can get it on Jumia.
Okay, and there's www.whomovedmycheese.com for more tools on this book. So you can get on Jumia, you can get on Amazon. Yes, so I don't know if there are any other comments anybody wants to make. I've read through the comments in there. There was a poll sent out earlier. I'm going to resend that poll. Actually, let me see. I'm going to relaunch it now. Can you please say, can you let me know if you're seeing the poll?
Yeah.
Well, I can. Yes, I can.
Okay, please, I would appreciate it if everyone filled the poll further to the conversation we've had. And then I have one question.
Christmas book.
Yes, go on with the question, Abi.
So my question is, I had a conversation earlier with Mr. Akisoya, and I think this book, and this is my personal opinion, is a loaded book. So the conversation will be ongoing on probably a bi-monthly basis, because there's so many things we haven't even touched on, you know, and I'm just conscious of time. It's a Saturday evening, people have plans, and I'm going to use that opportunity to say thank you so much for making out time to come to this session. This book, coincidentally, this book was interesting. I had this book at home, but I never really read it. I thought it was, you know, I just never looked at it. And then one day during COVID, or just before that, I was having a conversation with Mr. Kisanya. Actually, I think it was before COVID. And he had said, have you read this book, by the way? And I thought, you know what, I've seen that book. And I went and I got it. I found it from my shelf and I read it. And what I read then is different from what I got from reading it then is different from what I got from reading it now. And it's so instructive on everyday life, not just mediation. I think, a lot of people haven't read the book. I think it is very adaptable to mediation, and depending on your mindset as either a mediator or a party, it's something that's very valuable to add to your tools as a mediator. But I would like for this conversation to be ongoing. So I would like a yes or a no in the comment section, in the chat box, for us to have this conversation ongoing. And I don't know if everyone on here is in the book club. It's a WhatsApp group. I'm also looking to have, you know, I have the group, I think that about 100 of us, but it's not really been active. You know what, I'm going to put this in the group. So, but I'm saying it here because if you're not in the group and you would like to be added, I can put my number in the chat box and I would add you. But going forward, it's going to be knowledge sharing sessions on things that are very vital and important to us as Nigerians, mediators, lawyers, people generally. But I am going to restrict it to people who are contributing. So every month, there would be someone who is going to teach us, or we're going to share knowledge on something. But with this who moved my cheese. You know, I think there's still so much more conversation we can have. It's what, 8:18 now in Lagos. And I would like for us to wrap up if there are no other questions. If then I'm going to hand over to Mr. Kisonya now, because I know he has some things he would like to say, but I would appreciate it if you're interested in joining the book club, please put your name in the chat box, or, you know, I'll put my number in here and send me a message. That would be easier because I might not be able to get everyone. So I'm available on WhatsApp. Just send me a WhatsApp message and I will add you to it. Mr. Akinsanya, thank you so much, sir. I am humbled. I
Yes,
am
thank you.
appreciate you.
Oh, I'll tell you this. Many times when people think you are doing them a favor, they don't know that they've done you a favor. I think having to read this and and go through it again has been great for me personally. I'd like to try and do a 5-minute summary, which I hope will not be too brief, as to not have impact. But first of all, I think, number one, in terms of understanding this who moved my cheese concept, I think Mr. Okoro's statement is one that should really challenge all of us as a people. In Nigeria, I think we have refused to smell the cheese. The cheese has become stale. And we are just wanting to do the same thing, the same way, round and round. And I don't mean to be political here, but you can imagine, with all that is happening in the country, the Senate comes in and the first major thing they do is to order cars. See, that's just business as usual. That's just inability to adjust to current realities. The cheese has moved. The cheese has changed. Energy is changing. Education is evolving. Ways of doing things are changing. We need to get to it. Our source of revenue, we need to understand that, believe it or not, fintech is probably more important to us than even oil now. Oil is becoming stale. We need to move on. Number two, yes, and one thing that my brother Dipo mentioned, which is interesting, I don't mean to disrespect the legal profession or the judiciary, but it's true. What we thought was, giving justice or solving problems, the brilliant barrister with his erudite submissions in court before the fearful looking judge. That is old cheese. The cheese has moved. The cheese has changed. And that is why many of us need to begin to think of other ways of achieving the same end. Like I mentioned earlier, litigation, not because I'm a mediator, but litigation is focusing on what used to be, how it has been, what happened, who did what, who did not do it. It is completely antithetical to understanding the fact that there is new cheese, and even that cheese is constantly moving. And therefore, even in mediation, mediators are going to have to learn that, for example, how do I do mediation? I start opening statement, and after opening statement, caucus. Must it be like that? Must there be even any private caucus? When, why, where? How should you have a private caucus? How should you have your mediation? Who says that you cannot combine? At the last LMDC Neutrals retreat, we saw someone talk to us about a new approach to mediation, which he coined as mediative conciliation. Whatever it's not the concept that matters, but it is the challenge for all of us to look at things in a different way. Don't just have the same thing. Don't just go in and just repeat. Mediation is party driven. Mediation is party driven. Sometimes mediation is not party driven. Sometimes mediation has to be mediator driven, without losing neutrality. Sometimes There need to be new approaches. The new AMA, actually, it says, look, it makes nonsense of all the distinctions between facilitative, evaluative, all those distinctions, they are running out. So the cheese is moving. What is justice? The concept of it is changing. What is the resolution? The concept of it is changing. I had a brilliant conversation with my very dear friend, Professor Idonije, and he said to me, actually, alternative dispute resolution is a wrong terminology. You should not even be talking about alternative dispute resolution.
It should be appropriate.
He says it's not even appropriate. He says you shouldn't even be talking about it in that sense at all. You should just be looking at, listen, resolution of issues, and look at what is most appropriate to it. So there is a need for us to become a lot more dynamic. We need to become dynamic in our thinking. We need to move on. One other thing that I want to mention was that, when Hall was moving on, apart from leaving those notes, he was also leaving he was seeing little crumbs along the way. He could have stayed complacent and picked up the little crumbs, and he might have stayed there and not moved forward. Don't let little wins and successes keep you tied down quickly. Little wins, that's good. Take them, pocket it, but don't ever lose sight of the big picture of where you are going. Don't let the little wins distract you. Don't let the little achievements take you out of the way of your trajectory towards that big goal that is in front of you, that you are dreaming of, that you are capable of dreaming of. Because that dream that you are capable of having is also capable of motivating you to a new place. And finally, you'll find that when Hall got to that place, I'll repeat this, I mentioned this earlier. When Hall got to that place where he finally found the new cheese, first of all, the cheese available to him was greater quantity, number one. Number two, there were varieties of cheese there that he did not even know achieved before. If we take that kind of attitude, we are bound to discover things that we did not even think possible. Okay? And that I believe is what we should do. And one last note to those who mediate and those who even give counsel: there is no size fits all. There is no answer. How it was yesterday may not apply today. You did a mediation today. Yesterday, the facts are very similar to the one in front of you. The solution could be vastly different. Don't ever be stuck in. Be prepared to smell the trees, and be prepared that even if what worked for you yesterday, when you are beginning to pursue it, be sensitive. It's not working, and be quick to readjust and be flexible to move on, so that you can get to that place where you get the huge mountain of cheese with new varieties of cheese. But even then, my joker, even Hall could end up staying there and still not move. With time, even that one will become stale, insufficient, inadequate, and inappropriate, and you will still have to move on. In other words, one of the greatest lessons for Who Moved My Cheese for me is never stop moving. Never stop being prepared to move. And on that note, I'll say, Abiola, thank you very much. I've enjoyed myself too. It's not easy to stop talking about this book. And maybe if enough people indicate in the ADR book club, we may have a follow-up session in another month or two to see where have people been, what are lessons learned, what others there are. Please forgive me. I would acknowledge once again and say thank you to my dear teacher, Mr. Dennis Okoro. And sir, your books will come. I guarantee that. Thank you very much. It's good to know that we know where we are coming from and where we are. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Mr. Fatogun, Ogbeni Fatogun, your hand is up, sir. It's
Right,
8:28. I am very time conscious. Thank you so much
So,
for
so we're
joining.
running up. Yes.
I
Thank
would
you very much.
appreciate it if you made it succinct.
Yeah, very, very. I just needed to raise my hand because of the things that Mr. Kisaya was saying for me was a bit far-fetched. I think unless you want to bring confusion into society, even though we're looking at change, even though we must be seen to move, but as we move and as we change, there must be rules and regulation. You understand? Because the way he said it, for me, it's a little bit dangerous. I mean, for example, mediation, there are rules. There must be opening statement, there must be this, there must that. But somebody will say, no, 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 you can't just throw it away. You don't do it the way, it's scary. It's scary. You understand? Change, yes, but there must be rules and standards. We may not be happy with what's happening in the legal system, maybe because of human nature, because of overbearing of politicians and things like that. But who is guilty? Is it the people on the bench or we as a society? We must be very careful to stop pointing fingers. You understand? The society had
Sorry,
been corrupt.
I'm going to interrupt you there, sir. I'm sorry, sir.
Yeah,
I think that was Mr. Kisonyers, and I'm going to let him speak, but I think that was his own contribution.
yeah,
I
I understand.
I doubt that it's a mandate for anybody to break the law, because I know I mean, compared to me, he's a very senior lawyer. So
Yeah.
for me, I think that was just his own comment.
Okay.
I'd like to, sorry, I'm sorry to interject, because of time, I
Okay.
would appreciate it if between you and Mr. Kisan, you took this offline.
We
One,
should take it off.
two,
Yeah. Okay.
yes.
I mean,
Two, I see that
like
my lecturer, my own, me too, I have lecturers. So my own lecturer too is here. Professor Mary, I just saw his name now in the chat. Professor Mary is here. And I think I saw my mom. So which is why I cut short, but I think she's left now. I wanted to introduce her to Mr. Okoro. Thank you, Professor Mary. You are here. I see you. Thank you so much for joining, sir. I know you're in the middle of something. And I'd just like to say my mommy and Professor Mary oh, my mommy is back. There she is. Mommy, can you please unmute? There's a gentleman here, Mr. Okoro. He is, I'm taking, please kindly indulge me. Oh, she's gone. Oh, okay.
well,
Anyways, I just want to say thank you to Professor Mary for joining me, because I know they're in the middle of something. My mommy and Professor Mary are celebrating 40 years of going to law school today. So they're somewhere, I don't know where, somewhere in Uyo or something. So I guess they're in the middle of celebrations. Yes, Professor Mary is here. He put it
that's
in the
great.
chat box. Yes. He was my lecturer in university, and he happened to also happened to be my mom's classmates when she was in Unilag, and they went to law school together. So I just want to say thank you for them. Thank you to them for being here while they are celebrating 40 years of going to law school. All right, sir. So Mr. Ogbeni Fatogun, if you would like to round up, I would
Well,
appreciate that.
yeah, well, thank you very much. I mean, like I said, I've read the book and I could see that it applies to human nature. It affects all of us. It touches each one of us. We can see it all around us. We can see all that is happening within the book happening all around us. I'm only saying that human nature and human society must still have some guidelines. Whilst we are changing, whilst we are doing things, you understand? Because if I say I do it in a way that, without necessarily looking at my surrounding, I could become a crisis. You understand? It's nice to sit in an aircraft, for example, and the lady says, fasten your seatbelt. Um, and I believe that I can sit without fastening a seatbelt. You understand? Then, because I may be looking at inertia from a different angle. You understand? So what I'm trying to say is that human nature may want to test the surrounding beyond what is appearing normal, but we need to also take it easy, so to say. I read the book and I saw some of those. You need to, all that affect the human nature, but one needs to also be very, very, um, is it careful, so to say? Because even if you look at civilizations that are far ahead of us, the Chinese, many years of civilization ahead of us, change, you could see it happening. So even with our own small civilization in terms of our democracy and things like that, change is coming in. It's like when you make rice, the old rice, not the new rice now. The old rice, when you have to when you want to cook beans, you have to separate the, the stones. And no matter where you separate the stones, there's one that little particle of stone that when you step, it will still be hiding, and then when you eat it, you just crack your teeth. You understand? Unlike the new rice now, where you don't see anything in it. So what I'm trying to say is just that I identify with I think how now in that book, and I can also say that change is all within all of us as human nature, and it's just that how quickly do you adapt to change? How quickly do you embrace change? That's just my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Benifatogun. I think if there are no other questions, comments, I would say this would be a good time to wrap it up. Mr. Kisonya, I am humbled. I am grateful. I do not take your friendship, the relationship we have, your guidance and your wisdom. I do not take it for granted. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So if I am assuming, is there anything you would like to say, sir, before I wrap it up for the
just a few social comments. I just want to greet Ronke Adedayo and Awuneba Jumagobia, who I don't know whether that's just Awuneba herself or Awuneba and Odeng. And there are one or two other names that I don't waste our time recognizing everyone, but I feel very, very, very honored and privileged that many of such friends are with us. Justina Lewa, I see Annie Ayeni there. I see, and of course, Natalia, you have come a long way. I remembered our first co-mediation together, and I thank God for that. So I remember some of these things. And when if I don't, I'm not happy with you at all for a different reason because I did eat your birthday cake and you didn't send my slice to me. So I'm not talking to you. Please don't talk to me until you send my birthday slice cake from your birthday cake. If you don't, you're not my friend again.
Thank
you're
you
not
very much.
forgiven.
I will do
that. I'm insisting, and also I'd like to reiterate this from Abby. There's ADR book club. I think we should, as many of us as possible, try to get on so that um, we can try and keep this dialogue on. I think it's a very important dialogue. Number two, I think it would also help us to gauge if we need to do one or two further sessions on this matter, but honing in a little bit more closely into mediation. And so we encourage you, like Abby said at the beginning, please don't just be on the ADR book club. Don't just send don't laugh alone stuff there. Can you please let's have a really useful dialogue on how this thing's moving on. Natalia, I'm very, very keen on hearing more about your adventures and what you've learned as you move forward. I've seen some evidence of that in some of your writings. Dupe Abodunde, I'm so glad you're here. And incidentally, Dupe does and her husband, they do a lot of things in the area of recording Nigeria's Christian history. And one of the things that I learned from the things that I've seen in the books and the materials they produced is that, boy, there are many things that we have not realized need to have changed, even in our approach to even our faith in terms of our Christianity and religion. And maybe if we did, there will be less conflict between people and the various religions. So, Dupe, thank you very much for being on. Much love to your husband. My sister, Bodu, is on. My dear sister, Olakwiju Okunboa, and a few others. If I haven't mentioned this, because I'm not seeing all the names completely, but Melvin, thank you. Genevieve, thank you very much. You were a bit quiet. I thought you would say something, but it's okay. Maybe next time we'll get to hear you. So with that, Biola, is only left for me now to say thank you to you two for inviting me, because if you did not invite me, I would not have the opportunity of this great company and this great conversation. Thank you very much. And I think on that point, I'd like to say good night to everyone. Well, good afternoon for some and good night to others.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. I think my mom joined. I think she's having issues. I just wanted to say hello to her. And I wanted to reiterate.
And I salute her especially too.
I wanted to reiterate
that we see her creation.
But thank you so much, everyone. I do not take it for granted. We have 32 people here. We had about 40 earlier. I am humbled. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much for making out time to learn with Mr. Kisoyan. I really appreciate this. And hopefully we'll have enough people on the group who will decide to move this forward, and then we'll take it from there. I put my phone number in the chat, so if you want to reach out to me, please do that. I will take it from there, because I think we're not having enough conversations about how we handle situations and about how we deal with situations. I think these are important conversations that need to be had. And with the likes of people like Mr. Okoro and Mr. Kisoya in our midst, it would be healthy conversation. I also see a very good friend of mine, GMO, Leonard Silk. I am humbled. Thank you. Sorry, I call him GMO. Leonard Silk, his George Oguntade, he's here with us. Thank you so much, Leonard Silk. Thank you to my friends. Thank you to Mr. Kisoya. Mr. Okoro, God bless you, sir. You have just gingered my swagger now. I have been fighting with AI, but I will embrace AI. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much to everyone. And I hope everyone has a good rest of their evening and a great weekend.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.